The hardest thing about setting a boundary with an emotionally immature parent is not the boundary itself. It's the guilt that comes afterward. That little voice that says, you're being mean. You're being selfish. You're hurting them. You should just forget it and just smooth things over and keep the peace. Because the truth is, we all know how to say no. We all know how to say what our limits are, but we don't do it because of how we feel afterwards. It's not the thing, it's the thing after the thing that keeps us stuck and struggling and overwhelmed and maybe bitter and resentful and causes those fractions in the relationships, the frustrations in the relationships, because we are not allowing ourselves to set our healthy boundaries. So, in this talk, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set that boundary with the emotionally immature parent in a way that doesn't feel wrong for you, in a way that's going to sit better with you, that's going to feel okay with you. And I'm going to work on some mindset stuff with you. We're going to work on some thoughts in there that are preventing you from setting those boundaries in the first place. And then we're going to walk you through some specific ways that you can set your boundaries with an emotionally immature parent in a bunch of different typical circumstances that come up with adult parents of adults. And yeah, I'm not going to lie. It sometimes is hard to set and hold your healthy boundaries in relationships, especially with people who are not the best at receiving them. But what's the alternative? And we're going to look at why we need to be doing this in order to actually preserve and protect the relationship, and understanding that boundaries don't make you mean, they make you clear. They make you honest. They make you willing to invest in the relationship instead of just disregarding the person, cutting them off altogether, or staying in it, feeling angry, bitter, and resentful that eventually comes out in other ways that are not good for the relationship. So we're going to get into this in just a second. But first, if you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second to introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you are back again, it is always good to have you. My name is Julia Christina, and I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, a speaker, and the author of my book, Drive Your Own Darn Bus. And I help heart-centered humans think better, feel better, and live better so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. So if you have a parent that struggles with emotional maturity, then likely when you've ever tried to set a boundary, to say something, to set your limits, they have either acted like the victim, they have gotten defensive, they have avoided accountability, they have flipped it back and blamed you in some way. And if that's the case, then boundary setting can feel impossible with them. And just so that we're clear, emotional immaturity doesn't mean that someone sometimes gets triggered and says something that they don't mean, or avoids responsibility, or they blame you for something in those moments every once in a while. We all do those kinds of things. We all act in not our best self under certain circumstances when we're feeling particularly vulnerable, particularly triggered, particularly upset about something, when we're having a bad day. We will sometimes not handle things in a very emotionally mature way. But that's different than someone who repeats the same pattern over and over again. The person who lacks any kind of insight or personal responsibility, or how something that maybe they are doing or saying could impact somebody else. So to clear that up, we all have our moments. This isn't about the moments. This is about the pattern. So let's say you are learning about healthy boundaries. You are learning that you need healthy boundaries, and you finally work up the conviction and the courage to stand up for yourself, to speak up about the issue, to say something, to set the boundary, and they lay the guilt trip. They get upset. They tell you you're being selfish. They tell you you're being difficult. Maybe they get quiet and say something passive-aggressive like, well, I guess I just don't matter to you, or that's fine, just do what you want. And then all of a sudden, you start to feel bad. You start to feel like, oh, I've upset them. That means I've done something wrong. But just so we're clear, when patterns are established like this in relationships, doing something that's against the pattern doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong. It just means that you're doing something different. And human brains often don't like change. They see change as something threatening, not because it's wrong, but just because it's different. And so when it comes to doing something new, our brains just sometimes need some time to catch up to the newness, to get used to the newness. But this isn't just about forcing yourself to set the boundary and then feeling terrible afterwards and then just letting yourself feel terrible and hoping that eventually it gets better. We're going to learn how to switch some things in our brains, how to switch some ways that we're approaching it that's going to help us in that process of changing the patterns, creating new patterns, and in most situations, much healthier and better patterns, both for ourselves and for the relationship. So if you're someone who really struggles to set boundaries with anyone, let alone someone who pushes back on them or makes you feel bad or selfish or mean for setting them, why this impacts you so much more than maybe it does somebody else who seems to be fine with setting the boundaries and not worrying so much about what other people think about them is for a few different reasons. So if you grew up with parents who were emotionally immature, then you learned at a young age that you were supposed to keep the peace in the family, even at your own expense. You may have also been praised only when you were agreeable, when you were easy, or when you were accommodating. So then every time you spoke up about something, even something small, you immediately felt like you were rocking the boat. Maybe you were criticized. Maybe you were punished. Maybe you were ignored. Maybe in some way it became very clear that it was not okay for you to have wants, needs, or preferences in the family, or even more specifically with that particular parent. And so you learned that having wants, needs, preferences was bad or it made you wrong. And so then you've carried those beliefs with you now into adulthood. But here's the key. It's a belief. Setting boundaries, having limits, preserving your energy, protecting your peace, allowing yourself to say no to things, to have preferences with how certain things go, doesn't make you wrong or bad. It just makes you human, like every other fully developed human on the planet who also has those things. But if you did grow up like that, then now when you try to set those boundaries, your brain thinks that you're doing something bad, not because you are, but because that's what it learned. Those are the beliefs that it formed during your formative years, when you're forming how you think and feel and show up and what's right and what's wrong and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, who you're supposed to be, not supposed to be, all of that. But this, again, it's a belief. It's a pattern. And the good news is that beliefs can change and patterns can change. So now let's look at 3 practical strategies that are going to help you relieve that guilt when it comes to actually setting the boundary. First tip, it might sound a little bit weird when I say it, but name the guilt without necessarily buying into it. What does this look like? So often we feel guilty and then we believe the guilt. We think, oh, I feel guilty, so it must be bad. It must be wrong. I must have to do something different. They must be right. This is my fault. I'm doing something that I shouldn't. We go back into that infantization of ourselves, that childlike state where if somebody in some kind of position of authority, like a parent or a boss or someone who's above us in our minds, pushes back, then we automatically go into that, again, that childlike state that we are the bad one, that we are the wrong one. But understanding that that is just programming. We learned as children that the people that were older than us, the grown-ups, were the right ones. But then you become an adult and you actually realize that grown-ups are just older people. They don't necessarily know everything. They don't necessarily have it all figured out. They're not necessarily right about everything. And so just letting yourself name it without buying into it, just being able to say to yourself, I notice guilt coming up for me right now. I notice it. There's me. There's the guilt. I'm setting a boundary and now guilt is showing up. And just being able to identify it for what it is, name it and normalize it. It's normal that guilt is going to show up, not because I'm doing something wrong, but because I'm doing something different. And that one little seemingly simple step of naming it and normalizing it and having understanding for it is going to release a lot of its grip because you're acknowledging it. You're not getting sucked into it. You're separating yourself from it instead of getting stuck to it, and thereby it loosens its grip. Our next tip for relieving that guilt when you grew up with the belief that boundaries were wrong or bad is reframing boundaries as an essential and healthy relationship tool. This is huge. Understanding that boundaries are not walls that keep everybody out. They are doorways and the foundation for real, honest, safe, and sustainable connection. So I want to invite you to just take a minute now and try these reframes on in your mind. This isn't me pushing them away. It's me protecting the space so that respect can grow. And the next one, I'm not being mean. I'm being clear and honest about what I'm available for and not available for. And that helps me be able to show up with love and generosity, not bitterness, overwhelm, and resentment. Our next one. Boundaries are what I need to make this relationship work. I need them to make this relationship sustainable and for me to stay in the connection. And our fourth one, if I keep sacrificing myself and my well-being to protect their feelings or to keep them comfortable at my expense, the bitterness and the resentment that's eventually going to build up inside of me is going to destroy the relationship anyways. So I may as well set the boundary because the truth is sometimes we have to do something in relationships that might hurt someone else, but that hurt is to prevent bigger or greater harm. It's like going to the dentist. You go to the dentist and it hurts to go to the dentist a lot of the time, but we do that in order to protect ourselves from further, more significant harm if we are not taking care of our teeth in that way. You see the parallel there? Boundaries are there to preserve and protect relationships and are meant to make the relationships healthy. And the truth is, when or if that person is not available to be in a relationship with you with your boundaries, then those boundaries are there to help you protect your peace and your well-being. Tip number 3, when setting boundaries and that guilt comes up, expect it. Expect things to get uncomfortable, but reminding yourself to stay calm. Knowing that emotionally immature parents often resist boundaries. They don't want them. They don't like them. They're used to things being the way they always have been. You being the way you always have been, being available for whatever you've been available for up until now, giving to the extent that you've been giving up until now, allowing them to kind of have free reign over your life or your time or your emotions or your energy the way that you have up until now. And so there will likely be some resistance. But again, that is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It's proof that the dynamic is shifting. So expect that discomfort. Expect it to feel a little bit weird. But then come back to yourself and remind yourself their reaction isn't my responsibility, especially if I've been kind, respectful, and clear in the setting of my boundary. And my boundary, my well-being, my limits, that is my responsibility. Both things are true. You are allowed to have clear and healthy boundaries, and other people are allowed to not like them. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't rejection. It's respect for both yourself and the other person by being honest with them. And also, boundaries are not punishment. They're often protection for both yourself and the other person in the relationship, because remember that hurt versus harm thing. And they're also sometimes about self-preservation, because the truth is, we are allowed to preserve our time, our energy, our well-being. We are allowed to make that a priority and take care of that for ourselves. And sometimes we need healthy boundaries in order to do that. Healthy boundaries are not selfish. They are how you stay grounded, present, and available for real, honest connection when it's possible. And also, if setting boundaries with either your parent, your partner, your friends, or the head of the PTA feels difficult for you, it feels uncomfortable or awkward for you because you don't really know what to say or how to say it, especially when it comes to saying no, then I have something for you. I have my free download. It's 25 healthy and kind ways to say no. And it's going to cover you in a variety of different situations, in a variety of different relationships. It's going to give you all kinds of different options of what to say and how to say no if that really does feel hard for you, because you don't want to be rude or abrupt and just say, no, get away from me. Although maybe sometimes you need to say that. But if that's really not your style, but you still want to be clear so that it's not misconstrued, that your boundary or your no isn't taken as just a suggestion, but actually your honest limit, then get those 25 ways to say no so that you can say it without guilt, without drama, without over-explaining, but also making it clear and kind. It's completely free, and the link is in the description below. If you've ever frozen up or gotten awkward or tried to over-explain when setting a boundary, or just started and then given up altogether on that boundary, then this one's for you. Boundaries are not rejection. They are a sign of respect for the other person and for yourself. You're allowed to take up space, and you're allowed to protect your time, your peace, your well-being, your energy, and you're allowed to do all of it without guilt. So go grab that guide, and also let me know what connected with you. I love hearing from you about what your takeaway or one of your takeaways were from the talks that I give. Let me know. And until next time, take good care of yourselves. Take good care of those around you. Bye for now.